Hey folks, good morning. Welcome to Fireside Chats or Demos at Lake Superior Art Glass. Today on Friday we're going to be doing a signature marble. So this is a style and technique I came up with back in 2009. I was really looking to kind of pioneer my own thing in marbles, and this is a culmination of techniques that I'd seen no one else do at the time. Not saying no one else had, but I really didn't see anyone else do anything similar for many years. And as with anything, this process and this style has evolved for me since I started it about 11 years ago. It's basically a culmination of my three favorite techniques. So one is a vortex marble, which the illusion is just incredible. Those are my favorite style to make in general. The second is putting an opal within the glass. The Gilson opal is one of the only stones that's really compatible with the Pyrex glass. Any other stone would crack or make the glass around it crack. So combining those two things and then creating my own color from melting fine silver and 24 karat gold to achieve a pretty wide range of color tones, anywhere from teals to really nice greens to kind of, what would I call it? Kind of amber, tan colors, just depending on the ratio of those two metals. So it's a fun process, and the name Signature Series came to mind not only because it was this, culmination of techniques that I hadn't seen anyone else do, and so I considered it a signature of mine, but also because the way those metals, the silver and the gold, come together, no two ever have the exact same coloration, and so that's a big part of what makes them so unique, that in 11 years of doing them, no two are ever going to look the same. Whereas when you use colored glass, you can make them look really similar. They're not going to ever be identical, but the signature ones are definitely more unique. So yeah, you get to see me do kind of a culmination of a bunch of different techniques today. We're going to start out by encasing the opal. So that's one of the biggest questions I get asked is, how do you get stuff inside of the marble? And the simple answer is from the inside out. You start with whatever's on the inside and you keep building around it. So today we're going to do one opal. I'm going to do an 1.5 inch signature marble. So that I just put one opal in those. As they get bigger, then I start doing multiple opals. But yeah, we'll start with that and keep building up the marble. This will probably be 60, maybe 85-minute demo, 75-minute demo, something like that. But hard to say. We'll see how it goes. And yeah, I've got the opal preheating in the kiln. That's something I always like to do to warm it up so I don't shock it and crack it. Opals are not cheap, and so I always preheat it in the kiln. Awesome, Jenny. Glad you're going to get to see the whole process. All right, so we've got a spherical opal in this tube of glass, and then I'm going to basically melt the tube closed around that opal, trying to minimize any air that gets trapped in there. Thanks again to everyone who's been supporting us through orders through our website. We literally have a whole stack of packages going out again today from orders throughout the last few days. So thank you. Hummingbird feeders are on sale right now. Those are an awesome spring gift. Mother's Day is right around the corner, so that's a little seed to plant there. So now, see if the camera will adjust to it. You can see I've got that opal encased within the glass. Now, there's a bunch of bubbles in the glass, not really where the opal is, but around it. So I'm going to remove a lot of this glass because everything gets magnified inside of the marble. So if I leave all these little micro bubbles, they're going to show up inside of the marble and really make it look trashy. So I'm going to actually remove a majority of the clear glass from around this opal. There we go. So now I'll add it to my clear glass. This will make up the interior and the lens of the marble. It's a piece of 12mm rod. That's the size I use for my 1.5-inch marbles. This is more than I need, but this piece just happened to be sitting around, so rather than cutting it up and making a short chunk and a long chunk, I just figured I'd keep the whole thing as one, and whatever's left over I'll use on another piece later. Also, one little bit of bubbles on the tip of this rod too. I'm going to get rid of those. Now the placement of the opal within the vortex, left to right, I should say, pretty much happens right now. So this opal is not quite perfectly centered within this cylinder. It's close, but it's just slightly off center. And what that generally means is that as I continue to make the piece, it'll get more off center because I'll be kind of squishing clear glass down into that vortex, and essentially that'll push the opal further off center. Now when I start doing the bigger signature series with multiple opals, I really have to space them out top to bottom within the vortex, because again, as I squeeze clear glass into there, they migrate and they get closer, because that clear glass is getting pushed outwards, and so those opals get closer, and so it's really hard to control the placement of those in that particular scenario. Now for the single opal one, I'm just going to add some more clear glass beyond the opal. That's going to help kind of center the opal top to bottom within the vortex. If I didn't, the opal's pretty much going to be at the bottom of the vortex, and there's a good chance that when I terminate my pattern and bring it to that point, I would pull out the opal when I make that termination. So always got to add some more glass beneath the opal. That helps get things centered top to bottom. Alright, so I think I left enough clear glass beneath the opal for this one. We'll find out. So you can see my setup there. You can see the round spherical opal. And I've got about 3/4 of an inch of glass beneath that as well. So that's kind of my setup for the core of the marble. And now I'm going to fume the glass. That's how I create my colors by melting fine silver and 24 karat gold. So on this particular piece of glass, I have a little droplet of silver, fine silver, attached to the end. I'm just kind of warming it up in the flame right now. And then I'll melt that piece of silver until it becomes a vapor, and that vapor will travel through the flame and stick to the glass in the back of the flame. Silver fumes really easy, and it's really easy to overdo it. So the silver layer is pretty quick. can always add more, but it's really hard to take away fuming. So that wasn't quite enough, so I'm going to do one more blast here. And you'll notice before I inspect it, I always kind of bake it in. I use this reduction flame that brings out the silver as a color, brings it out as kind of a yellowish color if you don't have it on there too heavy. So I always do that to check it before I make my assessment. So if you don't, the glass can just stay looking clear, but you might have a bunch of silver on there. It just hasn't been baked in. So you can barely see towards the tip there. It's got a little bit of a yellowish hue. That's really all I'm looking for. It's quite a bit more yellow in person, but that's that silver layer. So I'm going to keep that warm and then get ready to add the gold. Oh, and I'll show you guys this one. Hopefully it doesn't pop off. I don't know if you can see it. A tiny little piece of 24 karat gold on the end of this rod. And I'll do the same thing with this metal. So the story of how I came into this design is one of my personal favorites. It was the summer of 2009. So I've been blowing glass full-time for about 6 months, give or take. I've been working with glass for over 6 years at that point. But I was, just 6 months into doing it full-time. And I made a couple of marbles, and they were really big for me at the time. They were probably like 2¼ inches. I don't think they were quite 2½, but 2¼ which was really big for me at the time. And they were the nicest, most beautiful marbles I had ever made. And I had put opals in them, and I had done a honeycomb pattern with this green tubing, and fumed the tubing with silver and did a honeycomb pattern, and did that as the background behind the opal. And I guess I should back up. The reason I was doing that is because I'd put opals in with my Galaxy series marbles, and no one noticed the opals. There was just so much sparkle already that no one noticed the opals. And so I was trying to figure out another design that would show off the opals a little better. So now I did the 24 karat gold, and you can see it's got a bit of a pinkish hue. That's not the glass glowing, that's actually the color from the 24 karat gold. It's kind of a pink color. And if you could see the reflection, there you can see it a little better. It's almost got a little bit of a goldish sheen to it as well. So that's good for the gold. Now I'm going to go back to the silver. Let's do one more light layer of silver. And so anyway, I had made this honeycomb pattern and put that behind the opal, and they were just beautiful. I'd done some really pretty colors on the back sides, if I remember right. Really pretty designs, and just gorgeous. Nicest marbles I had ever made. I was totally stoked. And so, I pulled them out of the kiln the next morning, was just absolutely thrilled with how they had turned out. And I took some photos of them, and then went to work and started making some stuff for the day. And I stopped to take a break for lunch and looked at the marbles again, and they had both cracked. Not apart, but they had cracks in them. And the cracks were right where the clear glass met the green glass inside of the marble from that green pattern. And I was just crushed. I couldn't believe it. The two nicest marbles I'd ever made, a whole day's worth of work, and they both cracked. And so I did a bunch of research, asked some folks that I knew that were really knowledgeable about the chemistry of glass colors, and basically came to find out that the green glass that I was using was slightly incompatible, as is the opal, and they're both compatible enough to the point where you can use them kind of independently of each other. But when you get the two of them next to each other, that was enough to make them not work. And so when we talk about compatibility, basically what we mean is just you can't mix and match different types of glass. I couldn't take a beer bottle and melt it with this glass. I could, but when it cooled, it would crack apart. So that's what I mean when I say compatibility. And so basically the simple answer was that this concept of mine and this design was never going to come to fruition because I just could never put an opal inside next to this green glass. There's one more glance at it. Kind of got a pinkish yellowish hue to it. Pretty subtle, but believe it or not, that'll make a really pretty green color on the inside when this is all done. So that's what led me to this. Is I said, well, there was no other transparent green on the market that was as vibrant as that, and I really wanted to make this happen. Green's my favorite color, and I love the patterning, and I was like, I need to find a way to make a green color, and I kind of knew that you could do that with fuming with 24 karat gold and fine silver. So I set out to kind of recreate that concept and eliminate my need for the green glass. So I started making my own color by fuming, and that's what led me to this design. And I can't remember at what point it morphed from being a little more two-dimensional to being a three-dimensional vortex pretty early on, if I remember right. But yeah, this is a series I've done ever since, and it's been really fun to see it evolve. So right there, I just put dots on top of that fuming. That's going to trap the fuming on there, because now when I go to melt things in, anywhere that doesn't have a dot of clear glass, that fuming burns off and just goes back to clear. And so those dots are what create the pattern on the inside of my signature series. So just melted in those dots. All the other fume burned off. Just kind of getting this back into a cylinder shape here. I'll show you guys what it looks like now. And it's got a bit of a twist to it already too. So again, really, really subtle. But now, once you put some dark glass behind this, it totally makes it look green, or any of the other hues that I mentioned before. Let's see here. That's not the one. That's not the one. So I'm going to put some black glass behind this. It's going to make that color stand out. There you can almost see when I put it against my black torch, you can see there's a little bit of a greenish tint to it right now. I'm basically just going to put black glass around this pattern. You'll notice I'm sitting down again today, if you've noticed from other videos. I try to sit down for any smaller, more detailed items, and then stand for larger pieces. I think it's good to switch it up. So now we'll melt in that black layer. As always, if you guys have any questions, throw them out there. I'll do my best to keep an eye on the comments and respond to them. We're going no music today. We're trying to get these up on YouTube and create a little bit more of a YouTube channel. So for copyright reasons, we can't have music in the background. So yeah, that being said, if you guys are into YouTube, check us out on YouTube, lakesuperiorartglass.com, or Lake Superior Art Glass on YouTube, and we'll be creating a channel on there. We already have one, but adding these videos to that. So give our videos a like, subscribe, share. All that is super appreciated. So now I'm squishing this into a rectangle again. It's going to give the inside of my vortex some really nice ridges. Now we'll add a rod of glass to the bottom. Actually, shoot, I should have... these little ones are oftentimes some of the best ones to get another setup out of. What I mean by that is you have to remove quite a bit of the setup to get these vortexes small enough. And so rather than wasting all that fuming that I did, I'm going to basically put this on another piece of clear glass and use this for probably a pendant in the future. And that way I don't have to spend the time fuming and layering for that pendant. We got Raven watching. What's up, Raven? Raven is a phenomenal marble maker. Does some of the most beautiful fume marbles I've ever seen. And I'm honored that I've got one of them in my collection as well. So if you haven't seen Raven's marbles, definitely check those out. Alright, so now we're ready to start twisting. And I don't need a ton of twist on this because when I melted in those fume dots, the pattern ends up twisting on its own anyway. So I'm going to twist this one a little less than some of my other marble designs. Alright, so we got to twist it up. Now we'll start feeding down that clear glass rod into the top of that design to help expand the equator of the vortex. gonna stop about there. I usually expand the vortex about maybe 2/3 of the way in general on that initial gather. And then I'll terminate the vortex and add my layers of clear around that, and then come back and melt down the rest of the clear to expand the vortex fully. So you can kind of see the setup that I've got there now. Just letting it cool for a little bit. So this is kind of a funny point here. You got to watch where your opal is at this point. When you go to remove the bottom of the vortex, if your opal is too low, you'll take the opal out with it, and I've definitely done that before. Now in this case, I've got it set up to make something else from that other side, so it wouldn't be the end of the world. The opal would just be in that piece, but when you're scrapping the bottom of your vortex and you pull out the opal with it, that's always a sad day. So that's why I'm always peering in there, checking to make sure my opal isn't getting too close to the bottom of the vortex. All right, so I've got my main vortex set up here. I'll take a little bit more off the bottom of that. And then I've got this other section, and that's gonna be perfect to make a signature series pendant out of. So it's kind of a cool way to get two pieces out of one setup. I'm gonna remove more of the tip of this cone. I'm making an 1.5 inch vortex, so that means from my equator to the tip of this vortex, it can only be 3/4 inch, which is not very much space. So again, these little ones are pretty hard to get dialed in. I usually spend especially when I'm doing my 1.25 inch, I'll usually spend a few days in a row doing those because it takes me a few attempts to get the 1.25 inch size dialed in. And once I do, I want to make a bunch of them because it just takes a while to get that mindset in place. So there's my cone setup for the vortex. Now I will wrap some clear glass around it. And here again on these little ones, it doesn't take a whole lot. It's really easy to do too much. As I've said before, a lot of times in glass blowing, especially at that stage in marble or vortex marble making, when you think you've got almost enough glass wrapped around that vortex, you've probably got enough. Really easy to do too much there. So I was at that point and, my mind says, oh no, add a little bit more. It's not quite enough yet, but my gut says, no, that's probably going to be right. It doesn't look like it's enough, but it'll probably end up being exactly what it needs to. And again, with the vortex, you can always add a bunch more clear glass to your lens, which is just going to magnify everything more. So it's better to err on the side of coating the backside too little versus too much. So once that cools in a sec, you'll see my setup. You're going to start to see that orange cone inside of the clear outer layer. I don't know where it shows up best, but yeah. Now we're ready for our outer black layer to kind of hide the clear layers. Again, I'm using black violet, my favorite marble backing color. Pulling down that equator with my paring knife, getting it nice and straight. And now we'll melt it all in. So again, we want to get it really hot at this stage so that if there are any bubbles that are going to be an issue, they get nice and round and kind of show themselves, so I can pop them now. So next week for our demos, I think Monday and Tuesday I'm doing some custom pendants. We had a few more folks have their designs selected for the Design Your Own Pendant ongoing event that we're doing. So I think on Monday I am sculpting a kind of a replica of the head of a horse, this particular gal's horse. So I'm going to do my best to make it look like that. And Tuesday, I'm going to be making a sea turtle pendant, something I haven't done in a really long time. I used to do some sea turtle pendants probably back in like 08, 09, but haven't done them for quite a while. So yeah, it'll be fun. We've got one bubble that needs popping. Dialing in my pinpoint flame. I haven't tried any of the new torches. I think Bethlehem came up with something called like the Sharp Flame, maybe. And I think Nortel has a really cool torch that I've seen Rashawn use that has a pretty pinpoint flame on it too. But other than that, there's no other torches that can really get the driving pinpoint flame that a GTT does. You can get pinpoint flames, but they're not going to be as driving. So even like the Carlisle CC doesn't have quite the same characteristics for the pinpoint flame that the GTT does. Now it all depends on what you're making, but to be able to pop a bubble that quickly and easily is really, really nice if you're making marbles or doing solid work like this. we'll put a little patch on there.
All right, and then now I'm going to start to expand the equator of the vortex. So I'll put a punty on the south pole, if we're thinking this like the Earth. Colored half of the marble is always your southern hemisphere. Clear half is the northern. So putting that punty on the south pole. Putting a ton of heat into the equator before I start feeding in that clear glass. You want to make sure that equator is nice and hot so it opens up and expands as you feed in your clear glass. Alright, so now I'll start feeding in that clear glass. I've got my 1.5 inch marble mold at the base of my torch here. So I'll continually be glancing down at that, kind of eyeing up the size, seeing as we get close to that size. As I've said in my other demos, but if you haven't seen them, people get a misconception when you say that you use a mold to help shape the marble. You know, because most of the time people think molds are something you just pour material into, but that's couldn't be further from the truth with glass blowing. With glass blowing, there's casting is, you know, taking liquid glass and pouring it into a mold, but for glass blowing, you're using a mold to help shape a piece, and so essentially I'm getting this piece as round as I can freehand, and then just using the mold at the very end of the process to really help true it up and get it even closer to perfectly round. Alright, so we're almost there. And as you'll notice when I show you in a second here, I started with about 12 inches of 12mm rod. And I'm only going to have maybe 3 or 4 inches left. That's how much of this rod goes into the lens of the marble. And it's just a little marble. It's just 1.5 inches. Alright, so that should be enough material for the lens. I'm going to let things cool for a couple of seconds, take off my punty, and start heating the backside again to kind of get that southern hemisphere to match and merge with the northern hemisphere. We're doing pretty decent on time. I think it'll be about 1:15 at the longest for this marble. It's almost round, and then I just have to do the background pattern, so not too much longer. Justin Haas, what's up, Justin? Justin's an old college buddy that was one of the first people to be allowed into my clandestine secret studio in the garage at my first college house. back then, not many people were doing this, not nearly as many as they are now. So not only did you not really want your neighbors knowing what you're doing, because they might think you're doing something else in there, but you also didn't want people knowing, because someone might go break into the garage and steal all your stuff. So I was taught to be pretty secretive about your studio location back in those days. And then of course I went and opened up a public studio, so. This is getting nice and round. About ready to use the mold here to help true it up. And I did overshoot this one just a little bit. By the time I add my background design, it's probably going to be maybe more like 1 5/8 inches, which is totally fine. I just got a little carried away adding that lens on there. I love bigger lenses on marbles, so it's easy to get carried away at that step. All right, so now we're ready to start doing our background pattern. As you can see, we've got a little bit more like a 1/3, 2/3 ratio, which is awesome. It provides really good magnification for a vortex. I just overshot my size a little bit, no big deal though. You can kind of glance inside there a little bit and see that opal floating there. So my aunt wanted me to kind of go over again what I'm doing here. My signature series is a culmination of my 3 favorite techniques. One is the vortex, or the illusion. The other is putting an opal inside, which is one of the only stones that is compatible with Pyrex glass. And then fuming to create the colors on the inside of the vortex, which is done by melting fine silver and 24 karat gold. And those 2 metals together produce a wide range of color tones depending on their ratios, anywhere from wispy teals and blues to nice greens to kind of olive or tan colors. So it's a really fun process and really variable process. One of the ways I always explain it is that, you know, it's really easy when I've got two of this series to show side by side how much the colors are different, and then I can, you know, tell you, oh well, this one is more olive color because I spent, you know, 1 or 2 seconds longer fuming it with gold than I did with the one that's green, and so those changes can happen really, really quickly with the fuming process. So right now I'm adding my background design, something that I take a lot of pride in. Since 2010, I have been limiting the pattern on the backs of my marbles to the year that they were made. So once I decide on a pattern for that year, all my marbles for that year will have that pattern on it. This year for 2020, I was thinking 2020 vision. It got me thinking about eyes and stuff like that, so I decided that I was going to do a dragon's eye pattern on the backs of the marbles. So I added my first dot, and that is experimental green. So that's going to be a really nice green iris for the dragon's eye. And I'm going to add a little tiny dot of black glass for the pupil. That's Raven, the color from North Star. Or Glass Alchemy rather. It's a really dense black.
So now I need to stretch that out. Right now the pupil is essentially round. And we all know dragons' pupils are not actually round. At least all the ones I've seen at the zoo have long, skinny pupils. So I'm going to stretch it out with this dental pick. This is a raking process. The way I always describe this is it's very similar to latte art, where you're creating lines or a pattern and then dragging something through it to pull that pattern with it. It's a very, very ancient art decoration pattern. In glass, I know the Egyptians were doing it about 2,000 years ago, and I thought I saw something recently. Someone had shared a piece that predated that even, that had the feathering pattern. And I know, I think the ancient Chinese people, when they would make dyes and like dye different patterns in fabrics, would also do that feathering or raking pattern. There you can see I've elongated it. You only get a couple seconds to see that before the glass cools too much. But essentially it's longer than it needs to be, but some of that gets hidden with all of my dots that I'll add for the eyelid, on the eyelids of the eye. So now we're going to give it a clear coat. That experimental green color doesn't look like anything besides black until you get a clear coat on top of it, and then I'm going to need to strike it a few times with the flame before I finish the marble, and we'll talk about that when I get to that stage. There's my clear coat. So this background design is a form of a dot stack pattern. And dot stacking is exactly what it sounds like, just taking dots of glass and stacking or layering them in a particular way to achieve a certain look. So each one of my dragon's eye patterns is actually 35 individual dots all put together to create the look of a dragon's eye. Right now, you guys can see that opal. You see a little bit of that green color. It's hard to see on the camera there, but it's kind of got that olive green look to it. It's always fun to see at this stage when it cools enough where you can start to see how that color will look. And the one thing I've realized about this technique is that usually when I finish the marble and I've kind of looked inside and seen what color I've gotten, I am usually not 100% thrilled. I'm usually a little disappointed. It's never quite as vibrant as I want. But I've found out over the years that once it comes out of the kiln, it usually looks a lot more vibrant than it did when it went into the kiln. It's not that it really changes in the kiln per se. It's more that it's still a little glowing hot, and so I'm still not getting a great read on the color before it goes into the kiln. So I've learned not to get too disappointed at that stage, and just wait for the next day, pull it out, see how it looks at that point. So I just added 8 dots of a caramel color.
That's my first layer of dots that I do around the eye itself to create the eyelids. All right. Next I'm going to use a color, forget if it's super unobtainium or silver unobtainium, whatever it's called. It's unobtainium, which is a dark teal sparkle with silver, and the silver gives it some reactive properties. So I'll get multiple hues from this one piece of glass because of the silver in it. Okay, so there's 8 more dots of that. Thanks, Phoebe. Thanks for watching. So we'll melt those dots in almost completely, but not entirely. So as I've said before, we're almost at the hour mark right now. And this marble could have been done probably about right now if I didn't do a background design on it. But these background designs are something I really take pride in. As a perfectionist, I can kind of get OCD with things. And so by limiting myself to one pattern for the whole year, I not only get to really hone in and refine that process, but it also helps my decision making or inability to do so for each piece. And what I mean is that if I had endless possibilities of what colors and what techniques to use on the back of every marble that I made forever, it's almost paralyzing for me to try to make those decisions because I'm such a planner that for me to wing it is kind of nerve-wracking. I'm always concerned that if I wing it, I'm going to have regrets because it's not going to turn out as good as it could have had I planned it. So that's why I really like sticking to one pattern on the backs of the marbles for the entire year. Kind of fulfills 2 different personal areas there for me. Oh, thanks, Phoebe. Everyone can do awesome things. It just takes a lot of practice. So everyone's got their own talents and skill sets, and just gotta dedicate lots of time to it and keep refining and practicing. So that was Mighty Moss that I used before, and now I'm going to use Andromeda, which is another striking green aventurine. This one's a little bit more kind of a forest green aventurine, but it has the silver, so that's also going to provide some different color characteristics. Another thing I should note, when you see my flame get bigger and smaller, I have a foot pedal down below that I hit with my foot to turn on the 2 different stages within my torch. I'm just using the middle stage today because I don't need anything more than that for this size marble. Yeah, it's a great way to save time and resources, especially when you've got both hands involved in something to change that flame out. So now I'm going to kind of stretch the shape of the eye. It's kind of rounded right now, and all eyes have kind of corners to them, if you will. So I'm using my dental pick to stretch that out a bit, and now I can finish melting this in and do the final rounding and shaping.
Maui John asked, what other kinds of materials can you use without compatibility issues? Let me think here. So as far as producing colors, gold and silver are kind of let's see, what mold do I want? The main two. I haven't heard of any other super great results for as far as fuming goes to create colors. Now alchemists, when they make colored glass, they use all different types of metals, copper and manganese and cadmium, and all different types of metals to create different colors. But as far as fuming goes, gold and silver are the two that work the best. And I'm not sure if you really get much of any results from copper or what's the other one? Yeah, people have tried fuming with titanium, or what's the other metal I'm trying to think of? I forget right now, but yeah, gold and silver are the two metals that work best for fuming to create color. As far as including things in glass, there are some other stones that work. I don't think they work quite as well as the Gilson opal. But I know that like orange kyanite works. I think you can get away with tourmaline. I could be wrong. And tektite and moldavite are two really cool stones that are actually truly compatible with Pyrex glass. You can take that stone and melt it right onto a piece of borosilicate or Pyrex, and they'll stay together. They don't crack apart. And those are two stones that were formed by meteorites hitting the Earth, and they're only found in certain regions. So like Moldova, I think in Czech Republic maybe, is where moldavite is found. So it's literally kind of a space rock. It's a rock that was formed not by the Earth's natural process, but by a meteorite hitting the Earth and reacting with whatever elements happen to be in that area. So tektite and moldavite, those are some really unique stones that work. Cubic zirconium can work more so with soft glass than borosilicate or Pyrex. Still not a guaranteed, home run. Stuff still will crack sometimes when you start really pushing the limits of what you can get away with. But I do know soft glass workers use cubic zirconium. What's the other one? I think I think it's pure silicon. Maybe it's silicon carbide. I forget which, but I know some guys are putting that inside of borosilicate, and that seems to work. I think those are about the only ones I can think of. Again, I haven't tried most of the other ones, so I don't have a lot of first-hand experience with those, but that's about as much as I can think of on that front. The tricky part about doing different metals, or different stones rather, is that they, if it's not really tried and true, like the Gilson opal, they can be ticking time bombs. And even with the Gilson opal, in theory, it could be. The reason being is that they're just not perfectly compatible. And so there is stress in the glass surrounding that stone. Now in a marble, it's really, really safe because you have so much glass around the stone that glass, that thick glass, is going to help prevent that stress from ever becoming a crack. But if you have other stones or even opals that are encased in very little glass, there's a lot less buffer there to help shield the stress in the glass. So that's one of the reasons I don't really use any of those other stones. Is the last thing I'd want is for a collector to have a $500 or $1,000 marble of mine, and 10 years from now it cracks because I used some mystery stones in it that didn't crack immediately, but I've heard stories of glass cracking years later. It can be something as simple as the barometric pressure changing really quick, like you've got a crazy front coming in that's bringing a tornado with it or something like that, where there's those pressure differences.
that can trigger stress that's existing in the glass. So it is something to be aware of, trying to use different stones with glass. All right, so we're almost done. I'm just doing the final shaping on the northern hemisphere on my lens side of the marble. We got some really nice depth in this marble. The opal is fairly deep within it, which I really like. Gives it more magnification. Yeah, it's looking like a really nice signature series marble. All right, we're gonna give it a flame polish here, just using the torch to smooth out the surface glass. Anytime you touch it with a tool, you leave little marks on the surface, so we're using the flame to polish it. And I'm gonna give it a good inspection to determine if it needs anything else, any other touch-ups or smoothing or rounding or anything like that. I'm using this flame as a beam of light to check the surface of the glass. I'm looking at the reflection of the flame on the surface of the glass. And if it bends or wavers or distorts, then I know I've got a slight imperfection in that area. I also like to use the fluorescent lights because they're a nice straight beam of light that doesn't move at all. And so those are really, really helpful for checking. All right, so I'm gonna do one more fire polish right at the equator. Just get it nice and hot. And use my paddle to kind of help shield. Adjust my flame a little bit here. Help shield my punty so that I can buy a little bit more time in that heat without losing control of the marble. Especially on a polishing heat like this, I like to go really slow. And if that punty were to get hot and I'm going slow, then I lose my center, which is already starting to happen a little bit here. All right, it's looking pretty good. I'll try to show you guys a quick glimpse here before I put it in the mold. Gotta get some light in there maybe. You can see that opal. Pretty hard to see the colors right now. But
we've got some really nice olive green colors going on. Nice swirl, really nice deep vortex. Let's see if over here you can see it any better. Get the colors a little bit better there in the light. Yeah, that turned out really great. Alright, so to finish it up, I'm going to set it down into the mold that I've been shaping it in. Now even though this glass is still about 1,000 degrees, it's not hot enough to change shape anymore. So putting it in the mold doesn't run the risk of it changing shape at all at this point. A couple little taps to break off the punty. And we're going to polish the backside. So I can't spin anymore, so I switch hands and try to shoot the flame at it from all directions. Now I'm going to polish this 3 times to get my experimental green color to really strike out and show up. So again, just checking the beams of light on it, seeing if there's any trouble areas that I want to heat more than others. And then just letting it cool until it stops glowing, and then I'll polish it again. And then we'll let it cool. You might be good with 2 polishes or 2 striking cycles on this one. Getting some really nice colors already out of that experimental green. So yeah, I may leave this one. I don't know, it's tough to say. 3 is kind of the magic number. It's tried and true. Yeah, we'll do once more. And again, this is a striking color, so it's changing every time it heats and cools. And I have to do this one with the flame because the kiln can't get hot enough to change this color. So you got to do it with the flame before it goes into the kiln. And the kiln will kind of do the final change to green. But yeah, if you don't get it to a really nice blue-green prior to going into the kiln, you won't get the nice greens when it's done. So there's the finished marble. Again, I know it's super hard. You guys can't quite see that background design. But yeah, it turned out really nice. Super happy with it. 1.5 inch signature marble. Now it goes into the kiln to cool slowly. And then tonight we'll run a program in that kiln that'll cool it over the course of about 12 hours. So it's about 1,000 degrees in there now, and it'll sit at that all day. And then tonight we'll cool it slowly. My aunt asked if I have the marble I made yesterday nearby. I don't, but I did take a video of it, so I'm thinking Jody will probably post it maybe even later today or something. So
I do have a video of it, so keep an eye open for that. You can see what I did yesterday. It turned out really, really nice. Super happy with that one. Yeah, I'm trying to think what else. As I said before, keep checking our website. We're getting new products up there all the time. Hummingbird feeders are on sale, so start thinking Mother's Day. We've got a bunch of deep discounts in our clearance items, like $10 paperweights, just other awesome gifts. Thanks to everyone who's already ordered. We shipped out, I think, 21 orders between yesterday and today, something like that. So thank you guys a lot. We appreciate it. Yeah, and tune in every weekday at 10 a.m. for more live streams. Like I said, next Monday and Tuesday I'm doing some custom pendants. And I don't know if we've determined what the rest of the week we'll have in store, but we'll get that schedule published soon, and you guys can keep watching every day at 10. If you have suggestions of things you'd like to see, submit those. If you have pendants you'd like custom made, we've got a form on that for our website, so hop over there and tell us what idea you've got for a pendant. We'll see if that's something we can do. And yeah, in the meantime, stay safe. Keep getting exercise. In Duluth, we've got another beautiful day here, so keep your social distancing up, but try to get out and enjoy the nice weather to keep from going stir crazy. So thanks again for supporting us. Keep supporting small businesses as much as you can. We really, really appreciate all the help. And yeah, appreciate you guys tuning in. So have a great weekend, and I will see you all again on Monday. Take care.